Now is take a look at the best case and the worst case scenarios for the three parties, and then we'll go across our table and try and get some responses. Remember, from the BJP's perspective, the best case clearly is to emerge as the #1 single formation, either hitting the majority mark or as close to the majority mark as possible. 113 is the magic number that we'll be chasing all day, and the BJP's best case scenario involves getting there. The second best case scenario is getting close to 113 and then being able to hustle up the support of, say, independents, the Janata Dal secular, and then form the government with the help of these independents and the JDS. That's if they're slightly short of the majority. Let's now move on to the next scenario that we are mapping this morning, another scenario which could possibly play out. This to do with the Congress's best case scenario, where the Congress would clearly hope that they're able to get a majority by themselves. And they're obviously hoping that the post-poll study done by India Today and Access My India is correct, and they get a clear 120 plus majority, in which case no resort owner needs to be disturbed. The second scenario from the Congress's perspective is if they end up very close to the 113 number, then they can just get a few of the independents. Remember, the India Today post-poll study shows that at least 5 independents are in the fray who have a good chance of winning, and if they can pull them over, then form the government. But that would be a bit of a jelly government, not full. Remember, in Madhya Pradesh, they were very close to the majority but couldn't hold on. So that's not good enough from the Congress's perspective. The Janata Dal secular's best case scenario is that if they end up 50 plus, if they do that, then he will be kingmaker, he could potentially be king, he'll definitely be the joker in the pack. You can't complete your game without having Kumaraswamy. Then that Singapore excursion would have been well worth it. If he gets 50 plus, he is dancing in Chinnaswamy, no doubt about it. Let's now quickly come to the worst case scenarios. And I'll start with the worst case scenario from the BJP's perspective. The worst case scenario is if the BJP ends up 60, 70, 75, then that's deeply problematic from the BJP's perspective. Not just what they have lost, they would have also received a big dressing down from the voters in Karnataka. That's not good news going up to the Lok Sabha election, because that will get the opposition really charged up. The worst case scenario from the Congress's perspective is if the BJP ends up as the #1 party, and then you've got a problem because the BJP with the JDS will be able to form the government much more easily than the Congress will, and that isn't good news. The Janata Dal secular's worst case scenario is if they end up with around 20 seats, and if their vote share, as the post-poll study done by India Today predicts, actually in the Vokaliga belt of old Mysuru starts to slip, is the party then becoming Rajdeep the next BSP? You have some rump of support, but that's not enough to be able to be of any great electoral significance.
And you know, that's significant because if you look at the Janata Dal's trajectory, its best case, its best election was 2004 when it won 58 seats, and since then it has struggled to maintain that 50 plus figure. It's usually been around 30, 35 because its base has shrunk in terms of its geographical base. There was a time when the Janata Dal secular didn't just get seats in old Mysuru, it picked up seats in other parts as well. And you know, in 2004, Siddaramaiah was part of the Janata Dal S. Times have changed, and all regional parties have to reinvent themselves. Is it just Devagowda and Sons? Remember, Devagowda is 91. This is possibly his last election. He campaigned a bit, but this was HDK. He did this Pancharatna Yatra, went across the state, covered about 90 assembly constituencies. So he is the joker in the pack. But there are times when you can win a game without the joker.
If you have a good hand,
if you have a good hand, you don't need the joker. So I just wonder, Professor Shastri, is this the election where after all the turbulence of Karnataka politics, one side will win clear cut? Is that more likely this time, according to you, than it has been in recent elections in Karnataka?
Rajdeep, right from the start, I have been emphasizing that this election will give a clear verdict. And our polls, not only ours, most polls are showing the Congress ahead. We have always had an assembly with no majority only when BJP has been ahead or JDS has been ahead. Whenever Congress has been ahead, it has always been a majority, because their presence is across the state.
You did the CSDS post-poll study. Give our viewers a sense of what you're picking up. Is that
unfortunately, will not be able to, because that's coming out tomorrow in the newspaper, so I have to reserve the comment for that. But then the larger point I was making is, Congress, because of its presence across the state, whenever it is the lead party, it crosses the halfway line. BJP has not crossed the halfway line because of the old Mysore challenge that they faced. So if all the exit polls except one or two are saying that the Congress is ahead, past trends would tell me its being ahead would mean it will cross the halfway line.
Ashok Malik, what's your best bet today? Are you a betting man in the first instance?
No, I'm a very careful man.
You're a careful man.
Look, you spoke about how Karnataka has had a tradition of hung assemblies, apart from...
Recent tradition.
Yeah, recent tradition. One of the reasons for this is it has genuinely been a triangle of light which is gradually becoming bipolar. With every election, a little more bipolar. As Professor Sastry says, this may be the election where the Janata Dal vote comes down to a level where it cannot translate into too many seats. And you may be headed for a bipolar trajectory long term after.
You know, that's interesting because the first hung assembly in Karnataka was a fascinating election since we're talking about the BJP. 1983.
Yes.
Ramakrishna Hegde was supported by the BJP.
And communists.
And the communists. So, you know, you had these era of these large Congress majorities. Devraj Ars, swept Karnataka through the 70s, and then you come to the 80s, and then the turbulence begins over time. And in the last 10 years, you've never known which side it goes. Preeti, what's your best bet?
Well, I don't know.
Are you a betting woman?
No, I'm not a betting woman, though I have indulged myself in the office sweepstakes, so I'm hoping it falls on exactly the number that I've bet on. But away from that, what I'm looking at, purely for journalistic reasons, Rajdeep, you've called this election a gas cylinder election.
Yes,
and if I may, I call it the triple L election. Why I call it the triple L election? I would think a lot will depend on how the Bharati's vote. If it ties down to even our poll, we've seen that in terms of just, income groups, the lower income groups have voted more for the Congress. Local issues, the second L, which I really want to know how this Bajrang Dal debate has panned out. Has it worked for the Congress, against the Congress? Number three, ladies, I think, would be the key factor in this. If we look at our poll as well, Rajdeep, women have polled 11% more for the Congress than the BJP. So these three factors, and when I tie it into my ground experience, I would think, for me, these are the three big elements that I'd be looking at.
Particularly the third, I think. Women voters. I was going through some data yesterday. There is not, Rahul, a single election that I've been able to come across where women have not been with the winning side. Where women have outscored men, and we saw it with Mamata Banerjee, we've seen it with Nitish Kumar, we've seen it with Yogi Adityanath, we've seen it with Mr. Modi himself. When you get a major chunk of the woman vote, it's more likely than not, almost 100% certain you're going to win the election.
And 122 seats, women are more than men.
Yes, even though men polled more than 1% than women in this election.
But this would perplex the BJP no end.